Chuck Berry asked Jimi to play Johnny B. Goode as warm-up. What happened shocked the creator. Summer 1969, a music festival in Northern California. Not Woodstock. This was a smaller festival, maybe 5,000 people, held in a field outside San Jose. The lineup was eclectic. Folk singers, blues legends, rock bands, all sharing a stage over a long weekend celebrating American music. The vibe was relaxed, intimate, more like a gathering than a commercial event. Artists hung out together, jammed backstage, shared meals. There wasn't the corporate pressure that would come to dominate festivals in later years. Chuck Berry was headlining Saturday night. At 42 years old, he was rock and roll royalty, one of the founding fathers who'd literally helped invent the genre. Johnny B. Goode was his signature song, released in 1958, 11 years ago, but still fresh, still vital, still the song everyone wanted to hear. It was one of the first rock and roll songs to tell a story about a guitar player, one of the first to suggest that a poor country boy with a guitar could become a star. It had become an anthem, covered by hundreds of artists, known by every guitarist in the world, regardless of genre. Chuck had played it thousands of times, the same way, every time. It was his song, his creation, his legacy, his identity. Jimi Hendrix was also on the bill, scheduled to play earlier in the evening. At 26, Jimi was at his peak. Are You Experienced, Axis, Bold as Love, and Electric Ladyland had all been released. He was the most innovative guitarist alive, the man who'd changed what people thought guitars could do. But he was also respectful of the pioneers, the men who'd laid the foundation for everything he did. Backstage, before the show, Chuck and Jimi crossed paths. They'd met a few times before at various events, but had never really talked music, never played together. Chuck was getting ready for his set, tuning his Gibson ES-355, the semi-hollow body guitar that was as much a part of his image as his duck walk. "You're on before me tonight," Chuck said to Jimi. "Yes, sir," Jimi replied. He always called the older generation sir, a sign of respect instilled by his father. "You know Johnny B. Goode?" Chuck asked. "Of course," Jimi said. "Every guitar player knows that song." Chuck smiled. "I need to warm up my hands before I go on. Been in a car for 6 hours. Fingers are stiff. You mind playing it with me? Just a quick run-through? Get my hands loose?" Jimi nodded. "Be an honor." They found a quiet corner backstage, away from the noise and crowd. Chuck's road manager had a small battery-powered amp they could plug into. Nothing fancy, just enough to hear themselves. Chuck started the iconic opening riff, the riff that every guitarist has played at some point, the riff that defined early rock and roll. Then, Jimi joined in.
At first, Jimi played it respectfully, the way it was written, the way everyone knew it. He followed Chuck's lead, playing rhythm guitar, supporting the melody, staying out of the way. But about 30 seconds in, during the first guitar break where Chuck would normally take a solo, something shifted in Jimi. You could see it in his face. He was hearing something beyond what was being played. Jimi started adding his own touches, little bends that Chuck's version didn't have, quarter-tone bends that added bluesy color, vibrato that made the notes sing in a different way, more emotional, more vocal. His fingers moved faster than Chuck's, incorporating techniques that hadn't existed in 1958 when the song was written. Hammer-ons, pull-offs, double stops that created harmonies where there used to be single notes. He was still playing Johnny B. Goode, but it was like he was showing you rooms in a house you'd lived in your whole life but never knew existed. Chuck stopped playing and just listened, his hands falling away from his Gibson. Jimi kept going, taking the song somewhere it had never been. He wasn't playing it louder or faster. This was just a warm-up with a small battery-powered amp in a backstage area. but he was reimagining it completely. The structure was the same, the melody recognizable, the DNA intact, but everything else was transformed. He made the guitar sound like it was telling a more complex story, like Johnny B. Goode had grown up, moved to the city, learned about pain and love and loss, things Chuck hadn't written about in the original. After about 2 minutes, Jimi realized Chuck wasn't playing anymore. He stopped and looked up.
"Sorry," Jimi said. "Got carried away. You want me to stick closer to the original?" Chuck was quiet for a moment. His expression was hard to read, somewhere between impressed and unsettled. "Where'd you learn to do that?" Chuck finally asked. "Do what?" "Take someone else's song and make it sound like that." "I learned it from you," Jimi said, "from listening to your records. You took blues and country and made it into something new. That's what you taught me to do. Take what came before and transform it." Chuck nodded slowly. "Play it again, but this time go all the way. Don't hold back. Show me what you really hear in that song." Jimi hesitated. "You sure? This is your song. I don't want to—" "I'm sure," Chuck said. "I want to hear what Johnny B. Goode sounds like through your ears." So Jimi played it again. This time he didn't hold back at all. He took the familiar opening riff, the riff that's maybe the most recognizable guitar riff in rock history, and exploded it into something psychedelic, bluesy, funky, and completely original. He kept the DNA of the song intact. You could still recognize it as Johnny B. Goode. The melody was there, the chord progression was there, but everything else was pure Jimi Hendrix.
The notes bent in ways that created colors in the air, blues, purples, golds. The rhythm shifted and syncopated, adding spaces where Chuck had played solid beats, creating tension and release. He played parts of the melody and harmonics that made the guitar sound like bells ringing in a distant church tower. He incorporated feedback in musical ways, making it part of the melody rather than just noise, controlling it like a voice. He made the guitar sound like it was crying, laughing, shouting, whispering, all in the space of 2 minutes. Chuck Berry stood there, his own Gibson ES-355 hanging silent from his shoulder, watching this young black guitarist from Seattle take his signature song, the song he'd written and recorded 11 years ago, the song he'd played the same way thousands of times, the song that defined him as an artist, and show him possibilities he'd never imagined, techniques he'd never explored, emotions he'd never accessed. When Jimi finished, Chuck didn't say anything at first. He unplugged his guitar, set it down, and sat on a road case. "You just ruined that song for me," Chuck said. Jimmy's face fell. "I'm sorry, Chuck held up his hand. "I don't mean it like that. I mean, I can't play it the old way anymore. Not after hearing what it could be. You just showed me that I've been playing my own song the safe way, the comfortable way. For 11 years, I've been playing it exactly the same. And you just played it for 2 minutes and showed me I was thinking too small. Mr. Berry, I was just—" "Call me Chuck," Berry said. "And listen, what you just did, that's not disrespect. That's evolution. That's what music is supposed to do. Grow, change, get better. I wrote a good song. You just showed me it could be a great song."
They talked for a while after that second performance. Chuck asked Jimi about his technique, about how he got certain sounds, the feedback control, the harmonic tones, the way he could make one note sound like 3. Jimi asked Chuck about the early days of rock and roll, about what it was like to create something completely new when there was no template to follow, no roadmap, when radio stations didn't even have a name for what he was doing. "You and me, we're doing the same thing," Chuck said, his voice thoughtful. "I took what came before me, the blues from Muddy Waters and T-Bone Walker, the country from Hank Williams, the jazz from Charlie Christian, and I mixed it up into something people called rock and roll. You're taking what I did, what the blues guys did, what Dylan did, and you're mixing it up into something else. Something I don't even have a name for yet. But it's beautiful. It's right. That's what music is supposed to do. Keep evolving, keep growing."
"I always worried I was being disrespectful," Jimi admitted, "taking songs from the masters and changing them. Some people say I'm destroying the classics." "Those people don't understand art," Chuck said firmly. "A classic isn't something frozen in amber. A classic is something strong enough to survive being reinvented. If a song can't handle someone playing it differently, it wasn't that strong to begin with. Johnny B. Goode can handle what you did to it. Hell, it's better for it." That night, Chuck Berry went on stage in front of 5,000 people and played Johnny B. Goode. But he didn't play it the same way he'd played it for 11 years, the same way he'd played it on American Bandstand, on The Ed Sullivan Show, at countless concerts and festivals. He incorporated some of what Jimi had shown him, not copying Jimi's style directly, which would have looked foolish, but opening up his own playing, taking more risks, bending notes in new ways, adding small variations he'd never allowed himself before. The audience noticed immediately. They'd heard Chuck play that song countless times on records and in concert, and this time it was different, looser, more emotional, better.
A music critic from the San Francisco Chronicle who was covering the festival wrote, "Chuck Berry's rendition of Johnny B. Goode tonight was unlike any version I've heard him play before. There was a freedom to it, an exploration, a willingness to take risks. Berry has always been a consummate professional, but tonight he was more than that. He was an artist still growing, still learning, still discovering new things about a song he wrote over a decade ago." After the festival, Chuck Berry talked about that backstage warm-up in several interviews. In a 1970 interview with Rolling Stone, he said, "Jimi Hendrix taught me something about my own song. He showed me I'd been playing it safe, staying in my comfort zone. When you create something, you think you know everything about it. But sometimes someone else can see things in your creation that you missed." Jimi saw the full potential of Johnny B. Goode, and he wasn't afraid to explore it. The interviewer asked, "Did it bother you that he could play your song better than you?" Chuck laughed. "Better? I don't know about better. Different, definitely. More adventurous, absolutely. But here's the thing. I wrote that song. It came from my head, my experience, my understanding of music at that time. Jimi took it somewhere I couldn't have taken it because he had different experiences, different influences, different techniques. That doesn't diminish what I created. It enhances it. It proves the song was strong enough to survive being reimagined." "Do you still play it the old way?" "Sometimes," Chuck admitted, "but more often I play it with some of what Jimi showed me. Not copying him, that would look foolish, me trying to sound like Jimi, but letting my playing be more free, more exploratory. That's his gift to me. He reminded me that even your own songs can surprise you if you're willing to approach them differently." Years later, after Jimi died in September 1970, Chuck Berry was asked to play Johnny B. Goode at a tribute concert. He walked on stage, looked at the crowd, and said, "This is a song I wrote a long time ago, but a friend of mine named Jimi Hendrix showed me what it could be. This one's for him."
He played it with more emotion, more risk, more of himself than he ever played it before. And in the audience, old-school rock and rollers who'd heard Chuck play that song 100 times said it was the best version they'd ever heard him do. The story of that backstage warm-up became somewhat legendary among musicians who were at that festival. They'd tell younger players, "I was there the day Jimi Hendrix taught Chuck Berry something about Johnny B. Goode." Can you imagine? The student teaching the master about the master's own song. But Chuck wasn't offended. He was grateful. That's the mark of a true artist, being willing to learn, even about your own work. Keith Richards heard the story and said in an interview, "That's why Chuck Berry is Chuck Berry. Lesser artists would have been threatened, would have gotten defensive. Chuck heard someone play his song in a revolutionary way, and instead of being territorial, he was open to learning.
That's the difference between someone who creates something and someone who keeps creating. The relationship between Jimi and Chuck after that day was warm and respectful. They'd see each other at various music events and festivals, always made time to talk, always sought each other out. Chuck would ask Jimi about his new music and experimental directions. Jimi would ask Chuck about the old days, about the Chitlin circuit, about what it was like to be a black rock and roller in the 1950s when segregation was still law. There was mutual respect between them, the pioneer and the revolutionary, both understanding that their roles in music history were complementary, not competitive. In one of Jimi's last interviews, a few months before his death, he was asked about his influences. He mentioned the usual names, Muddy Waters, B.B. King, Bob Dylan, but he also said, "Chuck Berry taught me that rock and roll is about taking risks, not just in how you live, but in how you play." When I played Johnny B. Goode with him that one time, I was nervous. It's his song, his signature. But he told me to go for it, to show him what I heard. That permission, that encouragement to take his work and transform it, that meant everything. It showed me that great artists aren't threatened by innovation. They celebrate it. Chuck Berry asked Jimi to play Johnny B. Goode as a warm-up before a show. What happened in those few minutes shocked the creator, not because Jimi played it differently, but because Jimi showed Chuck possibilities in his own song that he'd never explored. The student didn't replace the master. The student showed the master that even a masterpiece can evolve. And that's perhaps the most beautiful part of this story. Chuck Berry didn't feel diminished by what Jimi did. He felt inspired. He felt challenged to be better. And that's what happens when two great artists meet with mutual respect and open minds. They both become greater. If this story of mutual respect and artistic growth moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Share this with someone who understands that learning never stops, even from your own creations. Have you ever had someone show you something new about something you created? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like this video for more untold stories of legends lifting each other higher.